Not really, just the outside. Good evening, everyone. We are starting tonight Maseches Shabbos Daf Kuf Lamed Beis and Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph. These are the primary Mari Makomos for how we know that brisim take place on Shabbos, that that when they're bismano, how we know that they don't take place on Shabbos or Yontif when it is shelo bismana. Asay dochelosa, asay, a famous shah sugya about what happens when a child, Rahman al-Islam, has tsaras on the orla. At the same time, there's the issur of removing the orla, hasaras orla for that. There's also at the same time a mitzvah darasa. How do those two interplay? We'll be dealing with a lot of those very, very basic Mari Makomos tonight. Let's get started. 2 lines, thank you, Mark. 2 lines from the bottom of the page on Kuf Lamed Aleph on the base opens up the Gemara. Mila, b'chol machshireh hadochen es haShabbos tivir Rabbi Eliezer. We started out this parak. The parak is named after him, Rabbi Eliezer the Mila. Afal pi that we don't hold like him. He was of the opinion that one is allowed to do all forms of preparation for bris milah on Shabbos. So says the Gemara, Minale the Rabbi Eliezer ha. How does he know that that's the case? Answers the Gemara, or suggests the Gemara, Imi kulhu gamar. If you want to say that he learned from all the mitzvos we spoke about yesterday, I underlined them in my Gemara. We spoke about lulav, we spoke about sukkah, we spoke about matzah, we spoke about shofar. And all of them were scenarios in which Rabbi Eliezer permitted one to do the machshirin, to do some type of malacha d'oraisa that was preparatory in order to fulfill that mitzvah on Shabbos. However, all of them had something unique. Kidde Amrinan, as we said above. We said that, lulav had the daled minim, sukkah was 24/7, matzah was men and women, and shofar was only during. Shofar had the uniqueness that it was carrying up the tefillos of zichronos lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all of them had a uniqueness to them, so we couldn't use any one as what we would refer to as a binyan av. So what's going on here? We can't use that as our explanation for why it's mutter to do bris milah. But not only that, as we turn to the top of Kuf Lamed Beis Maralef, malahanach. All of the other mitzvos that we learned about, again, lulav, sukkah, matzah, and shofar, they have not only the earliest time, but they also have an upper limit whereby if you don't fulfill the mitzvah by that time, you've lost it. If you miss lulav on that first day of Sukkot, if you miss matzah on that night, avar zmano bat l'korbana, you've lost the mitzvah. But that's not true by bris milah. People ask me this all the time. Rabbi Karesh, can we do a bris on day 3? It's much more convenient for my family. And I say the same line every time. You might as well pierce the kid's ears. It's probably a little dangerous to say that in our culture, but halachically speaking, it's identical. It's a total zero. The Raman Shulchan Aruch writes, if you do a bris at night or if you do a bris before day 8, it's a total zero. And you need to do atafas tam bris. We paskin, we do atafas tam bris. It's always without a bracha because there's a machlokes rishonim if there's a real chiyuv for. Is the baby now just mufka from the mitzvah of milah because he has no orla? It's machlokes rishonim about whether or not we make a bracha, but it still does pater tachanun. So if ever there's a day when I'm doing hatafas tam bris, I found this out in Yeshurun. Rabbi Cohen told me on the spot that even hatafas tam bris can pater tachanun. So we have to figure out how all of this is going to play out because we know that on the earlier end, it's true you can't do a bris before day 7. But the first time I ever did an adult Jewish circumcision was a 35-year-old man. He's 35 years late. Afal that's true. There's still the mitzvah deraisa for bris milah. That doesn't apply to any of the previous mitzvahs that we learned. So therefore, back to our question, top line Kuf Lamed Beis Maralef, what's the Mari Makom for Rabbi Eliezer to allow all of the machshir and all the preparatory components of bris milah if it were to fall out on Shabbos? Says the Gemara, Elohai Natamid Rabbi Eliezer Damar Kra. The pasuk says, "Vayom hashmini yimol b'sar or laso ve'afilu b'Shabbos." The pasuk says that on the 8th day, on the day of the 8th, yimol, the circumcision should take place on the b'sar or laso, on the flesh of his basar, on the oil, on the foreskin. Ve'afilu b'Shabbos. Says the Gemara, v'lichtov rachmana b'mila v'leisu hanach v'ligmor mina. Why don't we learn out all the other 4 or 5 halachic sugyas we learned yesterday on Kuf Lamed Aleph Lamed Beis, lulav, sukkah, matzah, shofar? Why don't we learn all of them from bris milah? Because says the Gemara, mishum de'ikal mefrach malamila shekain nichrisu aleh shlosh esrei brisos. Because we know from the psukim, Rashi highlights Bereshis Yud Zayin, Nemru la'Avram beParshas Milah, that the word bris was referenced many times. So there are a lot of different brisos that were made. There's something unique about bris milah, and therefore we could not use that as the springboard to teach us that other mitzvos would be allowed to be prepared on Shabbos, and therefore we cannot learn from there. Therefore we need our own drasha. All of that was Rabbi Eliezer, but we don't paskin like him. We paskin like the Rabbanan, that if you forget to make a knife on Shabbos and you have no access to one, you push off the bris. You're not allowed to violate Isurim on Shabbos to fulfill a bris milah, except for the milah itself. So says the Gemara at the 2.6 lines down, Kuflam and Beis Muralev, Adkan lo pligi rabbanon alei ela b'machshirei mila. In our Mishnah, the only time we have a machlokes in regards to the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer is by the machshir and by the preparatory aspects of the mitzvah bris milah. You forgot to make a knife. Rabbi Eliezer says mutter, the chachamim say not mutter, right? So says the Gemara, Aval, Mila Gufa, Divrei Akol Dochesha. Everyone agrees that the Mila itself is Dochesha Shabbos. There's no shittas out there, Lamaisa, that you cannot do the actual Mila itself. Even the Rabbanan who don't allow the Machshireha, they don't allow the preparatory aspects of bris Mila, but they certainly allow the bris itself. Why? Minalan. How do we know that that's true? The Gemara presents 4 answers. We will accept answer number 3. Here's answer number 1. Amar Ula halacha. It is the law. Namely, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. V'chein Amar Rabbi Yitzchak halacha, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So no pasuk. Says the Gemara, can't be. It cannot be that the reason why it's mutter to do a bris on Shabbos when it's Yom HaShmini is because of the fact that it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Before we get to the arguments here, just to make it super clear, in order for, you would have assumed that there's 7 days in the week and 1 in 7 brises fall out on Shabbos. That is absolutely not true. First of all scheduled inductions are not on Saturdays. Second of all, you have to really be in Shabbos proper, not during Bein HaShmashos, on either Friday going into Shabbos or Shabbos going into Sunday. It has to be not a C-section. Some poskim discuss whether or not if you use like forceps or suction or other methods of inducing delivery, does that ruin the natural component of the birth? Yes, no, maybe we paskin l'kula on those cases. But if it's a C-section, it's usher to do the bris on Shabbos. And if it's a baby born in Shkia, it's usher to do the bris on Shabbos. One might assume that with the forceps that you should push off the bris. We're lenient there. So maybe it's a chumrah. Maybe my language is off. We still allow the bris to be on Shabbos with all non-C-section related interventions. So forceps, vacuuming, whatever they do, those are all permissible to do on Shabbos. That's how we pass it.
So you say Bein HaShmashos,
Either way. If the baby, this Shiloh came up, I asked Rabbi Robinson about a baby was born 35 minutes after Shkia on Friday afternoon. But we paskin the Teisach Kochavim is 50 minutes out. So is that still Bein HaShmashos 35 minutes in? So the din was we pushed off the bris to Sunday. Couldn't do the bris on Friday, Safek Shvi, Safek Shmini. Couldn't do the bris on Shabbos, Safek Shabbos, Safek not Shabbos. We had to do the bris on Sunday. If you're a 42-minute Jew, then you use that.
45th minute for one of my kids. And it was the whole thing, the whole Chicago, 8 rabbis come to the thing.
The bris, would have been Shabbos?
It ended being Shabbos. Because in Chicago holds 42 minutes and therefore.
Wow. It's not what Rabbi Robinson said.
Yeah.
Okay. You weren't davening here at the time. No. Meisive, the Gemara has a problem with this first answer. We said that maybe the Marimakom that a bris can be done on Shabbos is at halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Says the Gemara, no way. Meisive, we learned in a Tosefta, minayim pikuach nefesh adoches haShabbos. How do we know that pikuach nefesh can violate Shabbos? Should be pretty intuitive, but we need a Marimakom anyways. Answer the Gemara, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah Omer, mamila shi achas me'evrav shalal adam doches haShabbos. Just like bris milah, which is only one aver, one limb of a person we see there, that it can be doches haShabbos. Kal v'chomer pikuach nefesh doches haShabbos, all the more so by a person's life. Says the Gemara, Visal Kedaita Chalacha. But if you were to assume that the bris milah that's on Shabbos, that we know it's mutter because of halacha l'Moshe Sinai, that can't be. Kal v'chomer me halacha mi asi. Do we make a kal v'chomer from halacha l'Moshe Sinai? No way. What's the Marimakom for that? How do we know that we do not make a kal v'chomer from halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Because Vatanya, 1/3 of the way down. Amar lo Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, he says to Akiva, what? We're not going to go into this sugya there. Etzem kisa'ora mitame halacha. A little small amount of bone the size of a barley can be mitame. We know that it's tame because of halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Urevi'is dam, a larger volume, kal v'chomer. You can't say that, Akiva. Ve'ein danin kal v'chomer me'halacha. We don't learn a kal v'chomer from halacha. So if that Mishnah is accurate, then you can't say that bris milah is halacha. You can't say that bris milah is learned out from halacha l'Moshe Sinai. And the Gemara embraces this argument and goes to answer number 2. Ella, Amar Rebbe Elazar, Asya os. One pasuk by bris milah, one pasuk by Shabbos. Both of them are considered an os, and therefore you can do a bris on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, well, hold on. Ella meyata, if it's true that the word os is the reason why it's mutter to do a bris on Shabbos, tefillin, dichsiv bohen os litre Shabbos. Maybe we should say you should violate Shabbos and make tefillin on Shabbos, write the parshios, tie the knots, everything, and put on tefillin on Shabbos because it says the word os. Maybe. Says Gemara, therefore you're right. That can't be. Ella asya bris bris. We have two words. The word bris is by bris milah, and we have the word bris by Shabbos as well. Says the Gemara. Well, wait a minute. We also have the word bris in another context. Gadol d'chsid be bris l'tchei Shabbos. What's that case of a gadol? I'll read the pasuk to you. Ve'arel zachar asher yimol es besar or laso v'nichrosen nafshi me'ameha es brisi hefar. By Korban Pesach, you're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach unless you were circumcised. So let's say that a person's a gadol. He's not a katan. He's a grown man. He's 13, 14, 15 years old. He's 50 years old. He wants to eat bris milah. The Kohen says, did you have a bris? He says, no. He says, goodbye. Brisi hefar. So we see the word bris there also. So you had a havamina to say that maybe we know that a bris is mutter on Shabbos because it says bris by Shabbos and bris by bris milah. Can't be because we have the word bris by a gadol also by Korban Pesach. So it says the Gemara, you're right. Can't be that either. Ella asya doros doros. We have the word doros by bris milah and the word doros by Shabbos. Says the Gemara, that can't be either. Let's say you don't have a beged that's mitzuyetzis for Shabbos. You have the strings and you have the beged, but they're not tied. Tzitzis tichsid be doros. We have the pasuk of doros in the paragraph of tzitzis. Maybe lidchei Shabbos. We should be matir tying tzitzis on Shabbos because it has the word doros. That can't be either. Elamar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, it's a combo deal. Done in the sugya that has os bris vidoros, may os bris vidoros. We look at the world of Shabbos that has all three languages of os bris vidoros, and the world of bris milah that has os bris vidoros, and then we say they compare to one another. La'afuke hanach, to exclude those such as tzitzis, to exclude all the other cases that are pacha, the case of bris milah by an adult for the Korban Pesach, we exclude all of those zechsi bahen, and therefore we have a marimakom. That's answer number 2. That's something that has os, bris, and doros. That's the gzeira shava number 2. That's our second answer. So we have answer number 1, which we said was, what was the answer there? We rejected answer number 1. And answer number 2, which was halacha l'moshe Sinai. And answer number 2 is that we have this triple comparative aspect of bris milah and Shabbos, that it says os and it says bris and it says doros. Answer 3, this will be the answer we embrace. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Kra, look in the Torah, B'yom. The pasuk says, B'yom hashmini yimol b'sar, also B'yom afilu b'Shabbos. Amar le Reish Lakish, the Rabbi Yochanan, hold on one second. I like your drasha, but if it's true, we have a problem. Elamayata, Mechusare Kapara, Zava Yoledes and Mitzora. These 4 people are Mechusare Kapara, they all need a korban. So let's say they want to do their korban on Shabbos. Why would that be allowed? What's that? Havamini Dichsiv Behu Yom. By the Mechusari Kapara, it says Yom also. So if you're saying Yom by Shabbos is a matter to do a bris, then Yom by Shabbos should be a matter for Mechusari Kapara. Yet that's not the din. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work because Hahu, the word by Yom, by the case of Mechusari Kapara, mibayle b'Yom v'lo b'layla. That teaches me that they can only bring their korbanos during the day, not to be matter on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, but by bris milah too. Hanami mibayle b'Yom v'lo b'layla. We also need a pasuk of Bayam. So maybe Rabbi Yochanan, the pasuk that you said should teach me that bris milah is during the day and not at night. Says no, we already learned that from somewhere else. Hahu, the fact that by bris milah that the milah needs to be done during the day. Where do we learn that from? Mi ben shmonas yamim nafka. We already learned that out by day. So we have the word yom left over for the drasha to allow Shabbos to be on, to allow a bris to be on Shabbos. So says Gemara, Hainami. We also learned out the case of the Arba Mechusari Kapara mi bayom tzavo so nafka. We already learned out by the case of Mechusari Kapara that their korban has to be during the day also from other words in the pasuk, mi bayom tzavo so, that it says over there yom. So an extra word for the drasha. So maybe they should be able to do it on Shabbos. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Afal gab, that by Mechusari Kapara Denafka we could learn out the din that it's only done during the day, mi bayom tzava. So Itzricha, we still need the second drasha. Why? Salka daita chamina, I might have thought, since the Torah was lenient in regards to those who were the Mechusari Kapara, by the Zav, Yoledes, and Matzorah, these 4 people who need to bring a korban. And how are we lenient? La'asuye b'dalus, that they're allowed to bring less expensive animals. They could bring birds. So then, the Laila Nami Leise, Havamina, that I'm going to be lenient by my korbanos and let them bring birds which are inexpensive. Therefore, I'll be lenient by them to bring them at night as well to make it easier for them to bring it. Kamash Malan. The second word of Yom that's used by Mechusari Kapara is not to extend the ability to bring a korban of a Mechusar Kapara on Shabbos. That's usher. But it does remind us very clearly that it's brought bidalus and that it can only bring during the daytime. Therefore, Rav Yochanan's Maramakom Mabiyom by Bris Milah still stands. But let's see if it stands up to the next question. Maskif Ravina, hold on one second. If it's true that the korban of mechusar kapara is brought bidalus, it's brought for those who are poor, that we have the leniencies, then maybe hey zar kasher bahan, maybe we should let a non-kohen bring the korban. Hey onain kasher bahan, maybe a kohen who's an onain, his mace has not yet been buried. An onain is that awkward phase between the death of an immediate family member and the time that they're buried. You're pater from mitzvos, you're pater from almost all mitzvos. You can still make a bracha as an onain because it might be usher to not make a bracha, but anything that's a pure aseh, you're pater from, no tefillah. Elamayat, if it's true, then we should say that in those cases they should be kosher. The zar should be kosher and the onan should be kosher, says the Gemara. But if you look at the rest of the pasuk, that's not pshat in the pasuk, because if you look at the rest of the pasuk by mechusar kapara, it speaks about korbanos in a very regular, classical way. The pasuk will revert back to speaking about regular laws of kohanim, and therefore, no, we would not be lenient to say that a zar should be allowed to bring the korban or that an onain can, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan's shita stands. Answer number 3. So Rabbi Yochanan's shita was simply biyom. The pasuk says biyom, so you can bring the bris milan, you can do a bris milan Shabbos. Ravacha, 3/4 of the way down. Ravacha bar Yaakov Amar Krush Shmini. The pasuk says vayom hashmini, the 8th day. Shmini afilu b'Shabbos, even if that 8th day falls out on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Hai Shmini mi boile lemute shvi. No, the word Shmini had to be there to teach me not 7. It wasn't there to teach me specifically 8. It was to exclude all brisim before day 8, as we've already discussed. It says the Gemara, no, that we learned already. Shvi'i mi ben shmonas yamim nafka. We have another reference of the word shmona, which is shmonas yamim. So maybe we'd say everything prior to day 8 is learned from shmonas, and the word shmini is left to teach me that a bris can be done on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, but still, we still need 2 drashos. We need both shmonas and shmini. Why? We need one of those drashas to teach me that nothing before day 8 counts. And one to teach me that day 9 is not like day. It's mutter to do a bris that day, but it's not the ideal day. And it's just coming to make sure that we don't want people to understand, we don't want people to assume that everything after day 8 is ideal. It's not ideal. This shaila comes up all the time. I have a Masorah from Rabbi first and from my Rabbeim. Let's say a family calls and says, I just happened to talk to this upcoming Shabbos. Someone wanted me to walk 10 miles to do a bris and climb 37 floors after walking 10 miles. So, yeah, what a workout. That's crazy. So I'll tell you. Seriously. So I have a Masorah from my Rabbeim that this is an interesting thing in general. You never need to leave your family to do a bris on Shabbos. You never. You can have a bris every Shabbos of the year. You leave every Shabbos is crazy. Rabbi first told me you never have to leave your family to do a bris. Anyways, I can't walk that far. I certainly can't walk 37 flights. So I said to the family, let me call around and see if there's a mohel available. I gave them a couple of names of people I trust, of people that I'm comfortable referring to, and I said, listen, ideally the bris should be on day 8, no suffix. If no one's available, we'll do the bris on day 9, because it's mutter. It's just not ideal. So they said, these are the people we want you to call. I called the right circle tab, a big tzaddik. He said, what's going to happen if the family doesn't use me? I know you can't make it, Phil. What happens if I can't do it? I said, they're going to do the bris with me on day 9. He said, I'll do the walk. He's walking 10 miles and climbing 37 floors so that the bris can be B'yom HaShmini. He's like, no, I've done it before. He's like, actually, no, I haven't, but it's fine. But it's gewalt. It's a huge kiyum of a mitzvah. It's amazing. It's amazing. Baruch Hashem. No, thank you very much. You gotta know. You gotta know when to delegate. You gotta know when to call on the. Seriously, this is recorded. I have to delete that out now. So says the Gemara, the Gemara says we need to learn that after day 8 is not ideal. Ela machavarta, you're right. That doesn't make sense. We don't need double psukim for that. Ela machavarta, we're going to go back to the shita number 3, Kid Rabbi Yochanan, and that's how we paskin. We paskin ladina that the reason why it's mutter to do a bris on Shabbos is because of the word bayom. The Torah says bayom. It could have said bashmini. It could have said Bashmini, Mol B'Sar Lasa, but the fact that it says Bayom, Rabbi Yochanan learns out, and that's how we pass in Ladina, is that is why it's mutter to do a bris. And Tanya Kavaseh, the Rabbi Yochanan, second of the longest lines on the page, Kuf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph. Here is a confusing brisa, which the Gemara will analyze with Delok Ravacha Bar Yaakov, rejecting shita number 4 that we just learned. Shmini, Yimol, Afilu B'Shabbos. We learned that we're going to reject this. Shmini, that on the 8th day you do a bris, Afilu B'Shabbos, Umani Mekayim. What would I have said without that? The pasuk says, Mechalaleha Mos Yumas. Bishar melachos chutz mimila. What I have said that you're going to only be chayav on Shabbos with melachos outside of bris milah, but by bris milah it's mutter. Oh, eino ella afilu milah. Or maybe it's only by bris milah that you're going to or maybe it would also be by bris milah. Umani mekayim shmini yimol chuz l'Shabbos. I might have thought that maybe shmini could have been misunderstood. Shmini yimol chutz l'Shabbos, a backwards drasha, not so intuitive, but that's what this Tosefta recommends. Talmud Lomar Bayom, the pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan said, Bayom afilu b'Shabbos, and this brisa supports the shita of Rabbi Yochanan le'dina. Amar Rava, I do not understand this Tosefta, not very clear. Rava says, Haitana me'ikara mai kanichale. What was he comfortable about to start with? In the Tosefta, Ulevasof my kakashali. What was difficult? Why did he say that maybe it applies to bris milah and maybe it doesn't apply to bris milah? What was the first havamina that bris milah would be included? It would be mutter, and what was the odilma that perhaps maybe it's not included? So it says the Gemara, Hachi Kamar, 2 lines from the bottom, Shmini Yipol Afid B'Shabbos, Umani Mekayim Chalem Osimas B'Shar Malachos Chutz Mimila, Aval Mila Dachia. I would have said there that Mila is Dachia. This was the Havamina of the Tosefta, the first part of the question of the Tosefta. Why was it that part reasonable to assume in the Tosefta? Because my time Kal V'Chomer. Because we have a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? Follow along 3 steps. Number 1, umat tzoras shedoches avoda. Tzoras is doche avoda. So Rashi here goes to explain that if there's tzoras, that you're not allowed to do the avoda. Tzoras is more powerful than avoda. And as we turn the page, the avoda doches haShabbos, and doing korbanos is allowed on Shabbos. And in those cases, we said mila is doches Shabbos. So then Shabbos shenidches mipnei avoda eno din shetei mila doches haShabbos. Namely, if tzaras is more powerful than avoda, and avoda is more powerful than Shabbos, and I can do a bris on tzaras, then I can do a bris on Shabbos. Math equation, relatively simple. Okay, good. So that's the first part of the Tosefta. Umay o eno de kalmar. What was the havamina that maybe we would say that you're not allowed to do a bris? So says the Gemara. Hadar Omar umimay de tzaras chamura. Really, what the Tosefta was hinting to in the second half of the Tosefta was, maybe tzaras is really not more powerful than Shabbos. Because Dilma, Shabbos chamura, shekein yesh ba'onjen ve'az haros harbe, because there are so many different malachos that you can violate. Umimai mishum dechamira tzaras. Yeah, and also, how do you know that tzaras is so chamur? Maybe it's not the tzaras that's so chamur. Dilma mishum gavra hu delochazi. It's not that tzaras is so powerful. It's that he's not a bar hachi. He can't do the avoda because he's tameh. It's not about the tzaras. It's about the ripple effect of the tzaras that he's tameh. So maybe that was the havamina, the second part of the Tosefta, that maybe we should say that a bris is not docha Shabbos. That's one of the possibilities. And then we would have gone to the second part of the Mishnah to paskin that. Umani mekayim shmini yimol chutz l'Shabbos. I might have thought that maybe the pasuk of shmini yimol indicates you cannot do the bris on Shabbos. Tablomar b'yom afilu b'Shabbos. So basically, Rava fills in the gaps, gives us some clarity on what the ratio was of the Tosefta, what the seifa was of the Tosefta, to give us that clarity. Next sugya, 8 lines down, Kuf Lamed Beis and Beis. Let's continue. We've got a little bit to go still. Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught us mila doches hatzaras. Bein bismana, bein shelo bismana, even if the bris is not on the 8th day, it's day 10, day 20, year 10, doesn't make a difference. If the person has tzaras on their orla, halacha is that mila is docha. We are allowed to do the mitzvah still. A bris mila afal pi, that it also concurrently removes the orla that has tzaras. Yom tov eina docha ela bismana bilvad. When yontif falls out, when a bris falls out on yontif mamish, day 8, mutter. My sister-in-law had a baby who was born bein hashmashos, going into a 3-day yontif. So that would have been day 8 and 9 and 10. The bris was day 11. Well, whatever, 11, 12, because it was Benish Masho. So that bris was pushed off 3 full days because of this line in the Gemara. Because Yom Tov Eino Doche El Bizman Bilvad. Minohan Imili, how do we know that this is true? The Tanur Rabban and the rabbis have taught us in Yol Basar, or also V'afal Pishiyesh Bahem Baheres Yikotes. Even though it's true that you may have a Baheres, you may have a type of Tzaras, Allah is Yikotes, that you can continue with the bris and remove it. Umani Mekaimi Shamer Benega HaTzaras. What does the pasuk mean that you're not allowed to remove a Tzaras? Maybe the first half means that it's, we would have thought that maybe it's with the exception of Mila, that by bris Mila you're still allowed to cut. Odilma Eino Afilu Mila, but even you're not even allowed to do bris Mila on this skin because it has a baheres on it. Umani Makayim Yumol Basar Olaso. Maybe I would have thought Bisman She'ein Ba Baheres. Maybe the pasuk only meant that I can do a bris when there's no baheres, when there's no nega. Talmud Basar. Here too, now we have our Mari Makom that it's basar, and therefore we are allowed to do the bris even though there is a nega on the orla. It's still mutter to do the skin. Answer number 1 of the Gemara is that it's basar. Now Rabbi has trouble with this bris as well. Amar Rabbi, I don't understand. Why was it that he initially said that maybe it's probably fine that you can do the cutting a bris milah with tzaras. And then ulevasof my kashali, why did he say that maybe it wasn't that way? What was his question basically? What was on each side of the equation? Hachi kamar, this is pshat approximately 1/3 of the way down. Kuf lamed beis, let's go. Yimol basar or laso bi'afal pi sheish baheres. The pasuk says that you're allowed to. Umani mekaim. What does the pasuk then mean? If you think it's so simple, you can do a bris. But the pasuk says hishamer benega hatzaras b'shar mekomos chutz mimila. I would have thought that you can do it everywhere except for bris milah. Aval mila doches hatzaras my time. Why are we allowed to do bris milah? The asyami kal v'chomer, because we have a kal v'chomer like we saw earlier. Uma Shabbos chamura mila doches hatzaras l'kol shekain. Shabbos is more chamor than tzaras. So therefore it should be mutter. What was on the other side? Umay o eno dekamar. Why was it that maybe in the Tosefta at a havamina that maybe we're not allowed to? What was or maybe that you can't do the bris because of the tzaras and the orla? Hadar ka'amar. Here was what was going on behind the scenes. Mimai de Shabbos chamira. Who says that Shabbos is more chamor than tzaras? Dilma tzaras chamir shekain doches avoda doches Shabbos. Like we saw on the bottom of the previous page and the top of this page, that maybe tzaras is more chamor. So we don't know which one it is. Talmud lomar basar v'afal shesham baheres. Lishna charina. Sorry, let me just be clear. Talmud lomar. Therefore, we know that the word basar, as quoted in the brisa above, teaches us that it's mutter to do a bris even when there is tzaras. So lishna charina. What's another possibility? Mila doches hatzaras my taima. And now we get into some lumdus ideas. The asi asay the dachi losa asay. As we know, a famous idea, and this being the archetype, this is the typical example, your prototype of what we do when we have an asay and a losa asay. The actual cutting of the orla is both the isser of hishamer minegat tzaras and yimol besar orlaso. In that exact moment when you are doing both an isser and an asay, the halacha is that the asay wins out. So that's what the Lishna Acharina says, my taima, to asi asay v'dachi losa asay. Umay o eno deka amar. What was the second part of the Tosefta according to this approach? Hadar kamar ema darmina de asi asay v'dachi losa asay greda. Now, when we say asay is docha losa asay, that's when the only two parts of the equation are asay and losa asay. However, hai asay v'losa asayhu. This is two things. Bris milah is an asay and a losa asay, because it's usher to not have a bris. So therefore, according to the shita that says that you're not allowed, the havamina is that because there is no asay dochalos asay. Because asay dochalos asay is when the scales are even. Asay on one side and los asay on the other. But where you have the asay on one side and an asay and a los asay on the other, that does not work, and therefore it would not work out. Okay, let's continue in the Gemara here. Just find my place here. Sorry. Yeah. Umani mekayim yimol basar orlaso bizman she'ein baba heres havamina. Maybe we would have said that the pasuk of yimol basar orlaso is when there is no nega. Talmud lomar basar v'afal pi shesham baheres. So this lishna acharina is just another approach. Either the first one was a pasuk approach, and the second one was asay dochalosa asay approach. Asay dochalosa asay approach. Which either way, the brisa concludes with the same pasuk. So it says the Gemara Tenach. I understand how all of this works out with a gadol. Got it. Basar, because by him the word basar is used. Katanami ksiv be basar. But when you have a person who is a baby, he's 8 days old, also yimol basar or lasso. But what happens benoni minala? What if a person is no longer on day 8? What if he's day 9 up until year 13? Now he doesn't have the din of basar. The din of basar doesn't apply to him because uvayom hashmini yimal basar or lasso, and by an adult we have basar by the discussion of Korban Pesach. But what happens when you're 8 years old? I get phone calls like that every day, almost every day of the week. My son's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What should I do? Does that child, if he has tzaras, is it mutter to do the bris? Maybe the only heter to remove tzaras, when does is asay dochalos asay, or the drasha of basar, when is that allowed? That's only a baby on day 8 mamish or beyond bar mitzvah age. So says the Gemara, that's a discussion in the Amoraim. Amar Abai asim mi benya. We learn this out from the common denominator. Mi gadol lo asa. You cannot learn it directly from a gadol. Shekain anush kares, because there's no iser kares by a child, but there is an iser kares by an adult. Can't learn one from the other. Mi katan lo asa, from the child who's 8 days old. Can't learn from him because shekain mila bismana, because he's getting a bris on the right time. So again, this child between day 9 and year 13, what's his status? But the common denominator of the katan and the gadol is that they are allowed to have a bris under those circumstances, and therefore the bris can be done. Therefore, the drasha is, not the drasha really, the hekesh is af kol shenimol and dochen es hatzaras. That's answer number one of Rava, that the common denominator of the katan and the gadol is that they're allowed to have a bris b'tzaras. So Rava says we make a tushel and say therefore it's mutter. The hekesh is therefore anyone, even the Beinoni, the child between day 9 and year 13, is allowed to have a bris even if it removes tzaras. Rava doesn't agree. 12 lines from the bottom. Rava Amar mila bizmana doche lo tzricha kra. He says, no, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that a child can have a bris on day 8. That's a kal v'chomer. Mikal v'chomer asya. U'ma'Shabbos techamira dochet tzaraf l'kol shekain. Because we know that Shabbos is, or do we know that? We have to see, because we've seen already twice in our Gemara today that maybe tzaras is more chomer. We're not sure yet if this answer is going to work. But Rava's Havamina is that Shabbos is more chomer, and therefore because Shabbos is more chomer, and we see that it's mutter by Shabbos, kol shekain by tzaras. Amar lei Rav Safra l'Rava. Rav Safra says to Rabbi, "Mimai the Shabbos chamir." How do we know that Shabbos is more chamor? Dilma teras chamir shkein doches avoda v'avoda doches Shabbos. So the Gemara clearly has an identity crisis here about which one is more chamor. Is tzaras more chamor or is Shabbos more chamor? So then it says Rava back to Rav Safra, Hasam, no. The tzaras is not more chamor. Lav mishum de chamira tzaras, el mishum de gaber hu dol chazi. The reason why that Kohen can't do the avoda is because he's tamei, and because he has to go to the mikvah, even if there was no tzaras. Even if it was removed already, the din is he couldn't do avoda. Today he still is tamei. So that's why Rabbi was of the opinion that Shabbos is more chamor than tzaras, and therefore the kal v'chomer still applies. Amai, says Rav Safra, v'yikotz bahar tova yavod. Why can't the guy just go take a scalpel and remove the tzaras? Let him go do the avoda. The Kohen should be able to move it because it doesn't make a difference. Mechusar tefillah, even if you remove it, he's still mechusar tefillah. He still has to go to the mikvah after the tzaras. It doesn't change anything. So it says the Gemara, Teinach, yeah, maybe he'll have to go to the mikvah by negaim tmeim if his nega was a nega tamei. But what if he has negaim tahorim, ma'ikal meimar? Then there's no tefillah. Then maybe Rav Safra recommends you take the scalpel, you got it right here on your arm, you take the scalpel, you cut off your tzaras, shalom Yisrael. You don't have to go to the mikvah. Nice recommendation. Ravashi drops a lumdus bomb, a beautiful one at that. When is it that we apply the guidelines of asay, dochelos asay, only under one set of circumstances? Kigon mila b'tzaras. When mila and tzaras happen, inami tzitzis v'kilaim. Here's the lashon here, so critical. Debeidna demisaker. At the moment that you're doing the Isser Doraisa, that at the very moment, let me say better, when the Maisa that you're doing is both the Asay and the Lav, like putting on tzitzis, like bris milah when a person has tzaras, that's when we say Asay dochelosa, Asay. But Rav Safra, your recommendation that you should remove the tzaras and then subsequently go do the avoda breaks the rules. Because it's not happening b'chad shachia, it's not happening in one Maisa. Your removal of the tzaras and your avoda are not at the same time. And that does not work, and therefore we reject this idea of Rav Safra. It says the Gemara, V'had Rava v'Rav Safra, even though it's true in logic, we reject Rav Safra. It happens to be that each of their shitas are reflected in the Tanaim. V'had the Rava v'Rav Safra, top of Kuflam Gimel Aleph. Let's continue Tanai. It's Machlokas and the Tanaim. The Tanya, Basar v'Afal Pishi Yesh Sham Baheres Imol Divi Rav Yoshia. Seemingly the shita of Rava, matching a line. Rava was later, of course, because he was an Amora. Rav Yonasan Omer, Einot Tzarech Shabbos Chamura Dochet Tzaras. Look, I'm sorry, the other way. The shita of Rav Yoshia would be the shita of Rav Safra, and Rav Yonasan would say that Shabbos is more Chamur Tzaras Lo Kol Shekain, that which was the shita of Rava. 2 dots, top of Kuflam Gimel Amud Aleph, line 4. Amar Mar. Basar Alpha Pishesham Bahar Simol Yimol Divi Rav Yoshia, just from the Bryce we just quoted above, a shita that we already saw. Halama Likra. This is a Gevaldic intervention with Hilchos Shabbos. Check this out. The Gemara says, why do I need a pasuk? Davar Sheni Miskavein. I don't care to take off the tzaras. That's not my intention. My son is 8 days old. I don't care about the tzaras. I want to do a bris. So why do I need a pasuk? Davar Sheni Miskavein is mutter. But Davar Sheni Miskavein is mutter. I don't need a pasuk. Let me just do the bris straight. What's the problem? Why do I need a whole lumdus, a whole amud of shas? It's davar sheni miskavein. So says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, lo nitzracha ela Rabbi Yehuda. You're right by Rav Shimon. That's taka true because Rav Shimon holds davar sheni miskavein is mutter, but Rabbi Yehuda doesn't. The Amar davar sheni miskavein aser. Rava argues with Abaye. Afilu tema Rav Shimon. You could even say that our case is like Rav Shimon, who says that davar sheni miskavein is mutter. How would that be? Where's the asay dochelos asay? Where's the need for a pasuk? Mo de Reb Shimon b'psik reishe v'lo yamos, because this case is a psik reishe. You can't just do that. You know you're violating the Isra v'Hishamar Minagat Saras. You can just cut off the orla whenever you want. When there's a tzarashik, you need a heter, you need a matir. So therefore, you need a pasuk. So says the Gemara, wait a minute. Ve'abaye lesle lahai svara? Abaye knows about this. How do we know? Because how many times have we seen this in our Maseches so far? 10 times. Abaye ve'rava da'amre tarvayu mod Reb Shimon b'sik Reish v'lo yamos. We've heard this Gemara 10 times in Maseches Shabbos already. Both Abaye and Rava agree that when we are talking about a psik Reish v'lo yamos, everyone agrees. Even Reb Shimon agrees that it's a psik Reish. Everyone should need a pasuk. So I don't understand, Abaye. How could you even argue that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not a Rabbi Yehuda Reb Shimon thing? They both agree. You can't argue that it's davar she'eino miskaven. There is no davar she'eino miskaven here. It's a psik Reish v'lo yamos. So says the Gemara, you're right, but there's a historical component here. It's true that Abaye at one point did hold that psik Reish v'lo yamos, and therefore even Reb Shimon would agree, but he hadn't heard that from Rava yet. Says the Gemara, Basar de Shame me Rava Savra. After he heard it from Rava, that's when he said, you're right, I agree. But prior to that point, he made the distinction, as he just did now, that maybe this Mishnah is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Says the Gemara, this whole thing that we just learned about Abaye v'Rava, maybe it happened elsewhere. Maybe this whole argument that we just had about whether or not Abaye holds like himself in the later story of Abaye and Rava, maybe that was only true somewhere else. Where the pasuk says, "Hishamar v'nega tzaras lishmor me'od v'la'asos." You have to be careful not to remove a nega. La'asos ata ose. You're not allowed to remove it directly. Aval ose ata b'siv she'al gabe raglo. If there's something on your leg and it rubs off the wound, it rubs off the nega, that's mutter. Uvamot she'al gabe tefo. Or if you're wearing a backpack and the weight of the strap is just rubbing on the tzaras, that's mutter. V'im avra falls off, it's mutter. Why do I need the pasuk of Hishamar b'nega tzaras to teach me that? Davar she'eino miskaven hu davar she'eino miskaven mutter. Says the Gemara, maybe that's where we see Abaye. Amar Abaye lo nitzrach elo Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe there we would say the Rabbi Yehuda is the one who would say that it's aser, and therefore we need a pasuk. The Amar he holds davar she'eino miskaven aser. The Rava says no. In that case, that's not true. You don't need a pasuk even there. You would need a pasuk there even according to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon. Everyone agrees in this case. The knife's removing the foreskin upon which has the negat saras. Everyone agrees that that's a psik reish v'lo yamos. Both Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon are going to need a pasuk. So says the Gemara, Abaye lesle high svara. First of the longest lines halfway down on the page. Abaye doesn't agree with this. Abaye v'Rava. We've seen this line many times. Amar tarbaye mod Reb Shimon psik reish v'lo yamos. They both agree about the fact that this is a psik reish v'lo yamos. So how did Abaye make this chakira between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon to say that it must be that it's Rabbi Yehuda because he's the one who forbids psik reishe? No, even Reb Shimon would agree in this case. Everybody knows you need a pasuk. So what's the havamina? Says the Gemara, same answer as before. Lebasar de Shame me Rava Savra. Once he heard Rava say it, then he agreed with him. But prior to that, he would have made this distinction. The Abaye, in this earlier time in Abaye's life, when he did not yet hear Rava say about psik reishe v'lo yamos, in this earlier time, Aliba de Reb Shimon, where Reb Shimon would have taka said that it's mutter because it's davar she'eino miskaven, hi basar my avidle. Before Abaye agreed with Rava, what did he think the word basar was for? I understand what you think the word basar is for if you say that we need a pasuk. But according to Reb Shimon, he didn't always hold that you need a pasuk here because at one point he felt that it was just davar she'eino miskaven. Says the Gemara, my Abid le Amar Rav Amram. Rav Amram says that it's coming to teach me the following: the Omer lekots beherasa humiskaven. That you can specifically the word basar is a matir. It teaches me that I'm allowed to have the kavana when I'm doing a bris to remove the negat saras. That is permissible. That's what the word basar teaches me. Says Gemara Tenach Gadol. I could understand with a gadol who knows how to have das. That's fine. That's what the word basar means. What about by the bris of a katan? Katan ma'ikal ameimar. Amar Rav Mesharshia, be'omer aviha ben lakutz baheres beno hu kamiskad. We're talking about the father. The father of the baby is the one who says that, and he's the one who has the mitzvah anyways. Says the Gemara, if we're able to make such a distinction that one person can do the bris and one person can have the kavana, well, that's going to change something drastically. Le avid acher, we should have someone other than the father do the bris, because the Amar of Shimon ben Lakish. When do we say that aseh is dochalos aseh? Kol makom she'ata motze aseh dochalos aseh imata yachol lekayim shneim mutav. It's better to have two different people do these things. Now, the father is the one who has the mitzvah, not to do the actual cutting. If you get a shaliach to do it, like a mole to do it, or somebody who's just not the father of the baby, and they have that intention, that's what the word basar would have been interpreted to in this earlier stage of Abaye's life, when we needed a drasha to be matir, and then we could have had one person doing something which is mutter, and then we would have avoided the situation of asay dochelos asay. So there we would have said doleka acher. There wasn't an option, so therefore the father of the baby did it. One more sugya for the night, and then we'll wrap up. Amar Mar Yom Tov Eino Doche El Bizman Bilvad, quoted from the brisa that we learned on Kuf Lamed Beis and Beis. How do we know that? How do we know that that's true? Amar Chizkiya v'chein Tana de Bechizkiya Amar Karlo Sasim Mimenu Ad Boker. The pasuk says you cannot leave anything over until the morning. Shein Talmud Lomar Ad Boker. We already said the word Ad Boker once. Ma Talmud Lomar Ad Boker, to say it again. V'akasav Litein Lo Boker Sheni L'Sreifaso. That when we need to do a sreifa, when we need to burn something, we do it in the second morning, namely once it's already Chol Hamoed, after the first day of Pesach. So that's what we're saying here also. The bris milah is the same way. If it doesn't have to be done on Yantif, push it off. So if the milah is not bismano, just like the sreifa was pushed off to day 2, which was Chol Hamoed, so to the bris, which is not bismano, will be pushed off to day 2. That's answer number 1. Answer number 2, Amar Abaye, Amar Kra, Olas Shabbos b'Shabbato, v'lo Olas Chol b'Shabbos, v'lo Olas Chol b'Yom Tov. So that which can be done during the week, that which is a bris shelo bismano, should not be done on Yantif. Answer number 3, Rava Amar Kra. The pasuk says, "Hu levado ya'aseh lachem." What does the pasuk mean? Who? What does the word who mean? Below machshirin. You're not allowed to do any preparatory work for the bris on Shabbos. That's not permissible. Levado. What does it mean by himself? Below mila shelo bizmana. You cannot do a bris which is not on time, because without the word levado, I might have thought it was mutter da'asi bekal v'chomer, because I would have had a svara, and the Mefarshim here point out exactly what the kal v'chomer might have been, but the word levado limits us from having that kal v'chomer. And Rav Ashi Amar, the last answer for the evening, why is it that we know that a bris shelo bizmano cannot be done on Yantiv? Shabbason asehu, v'havale yom tov aseh v'los aseh. Yantiv is an aseh and a los aseh. The vein aseh, the mitzvah of bris milah, cannot be doche es los aseh v'aseh, because there's an aseh of Shabbaton on Yantif and because there is a los aseh on Yantif of whatever the Yisr is of Milah, Chabura, or Shchita, whatever it is. So therefore it does not work. The lumdus doesn't work. This is a lumdus answer. The reason why we're not allowed to do a bris on Shabbos, according to Rav Ashi, is because Yantif has built into it an aseh and los aseh, and therefore we cannot use our rules of aseh, docha, los aseh. Wishing you all a beautiful Shabbos. We'll pick up Emir Hashem on Shabbos at 6 p.m. here in the Beis Medrash. And I will, Emir Hashem, make a recording after Shabbos still for those who are not able to make it in person. Have a great night.